However, on Friday last week, President William Ruto, in position of Attorney General, had mentioned, or rather presented the name of Rebecca Miano as the next Attorney General, the female Attorney General. Should her name be passed with Parliament, then she would have made history to be the first female Attorney General. And of course, in today's Parliament recess, and of course among the names that were read by the National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula, her name was missing, raising very critical question: what could be the reason of her omission in that list? And in regard to the changes, from the switching of changes from Defense CS to the Ministry of Environment, I'm talking about Duale, and of course Soipan CS switching to the Ministry of Defense. Why the sudden change of heart and these sudden changes in regard to this key position? What could be the reason behind these changes? And that is the question and of course that we'll try to unpack and even highlight this and try to bring some things into forth and see what is happening in regard to this, the 11-member list. And of course, to help me unpack this particular discussion is Advice Mundalo, communication and leadership consultant. Advice, asante sana for making time.
Asante pia.
All right, so straight to it. Today we have seen a surprise, if you ask me. Even members of Parliament were surprised by these changes that were made by President William Ruto, at a very changes that come at a shock to many. And of course, now the switching of this key position from Duale from the Ministry of Defense to the Ministry of Environment, and of course Soipan CS now switching to the Ministry of Defense. In your own view, what could be the reason behind this sudden change, and of course a surprise one from President William Ruto from his, the proposed nominees?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having me at KUTV. I think it's been a moment and a while since I was at KUTV, so thank you for having me. Now, on to your question, I think first of all we must be able to appreciate that the appointments to cabinet are president's reserves. They are a reserve of the presidency, and the president has the right to appoint whoever he wants to appoint to whichever ministry he wants to do it, and to reshuffle whichever way. Mm-hmm. So in the first place, we must be able to come from that understanding that it's actually his mandate. Now, what I read is, I think there was further consultation after the president's announcements. I think there was further consultation with the military, there was further consultation with various stakeholders, and just getting to understand how the work can be able to be done better. Remember, the president also has an agenda on environment, and just last year we were able to host the climate summit, and the president also sits as the chair of the climate committee at the African Union. So the climate and the environment agenda is just as heavy on his priority list as is our defense. So I think it's a question of further consultation and just being able to see at the level that we are, who is able to actually execute the mandate better at which docket. So I think we might also be reading too much into it. But generally, I just think the president had further consultation with various stakeholders, putting in mind the mandate and the nature of the mandate that he has, and the priorities that he has for the country in terms of, remember, the president has, is it the 1 billion trees project, and also the energies in Duale. Maybe he needed to be taken to a place where his impact is more felt by the people, not to mean there is no impact at defense, but just to mean most of the duty at defense is mostly on external relations and just keeping the country safe. And maybe the president needs more of his energy at the environment to just be able to execute that agenda even better. So I think it's something that just came up after further consultation of the various stakeholders that are able to constitute our country and just to safeguard the well-being of the country. That's my thought.
All right. And, talking about further consultation, there has been some area of concerns in regard to the 6 cabinet secretaries that were, reappointed, if you ask me. And of course, majority of Kenyans feel that this is a method of reused and recycle that President William Ruto is using, and some actually expressed their displeasure in some of the proposed names. Do you think probably this could be the reason why maybe you're seeing some sort of the last minute reshuffle here and there just to try and live up to the expectation and standards of Kenyans? What do you read in this?
First of all, I think reshuffle does not cure the perception of reuse, because if that is the perception, then reshuffle is basically the same names. And I also don't understand under what rationale you have used to gauge that majority of Kenyans disagreed, because the same Kenyans, I was able to see that after the dismissal of cabinet secretaries, we were also having Kenyans going online and being able to say, we want whoever back, we want this person back. And there was even a poll that was done by an independent body. And I think the highest ranking person on the poll was Professor Kindiki, who most of the Kenyans were being able to say, we want him back. So I don't think it is very right to say majority of Kenyans say they did not want them. I think what Kenyans basically were able to say is that they want people who can be able to serve the republic, people who can be able to espouse the leadership capacity in them. They want people who can be able to take up the leadership dictates and take the ministries to the next level. People who we can be able to see productivity out of, and not just their tribe, and not just their relation with the president, and not just that. I think that is where Kenyans were heavy. That is what Kenyans were heavy about. I don't think they were so heavy about who come. It's just about service delivery, and I think that is what we all must be able to be focused on. The aspect of people coming back, again, as I told you, it is the reserve of the president. Remember, the president has a mandate voted. The president is not appointed. He was elected by the very Kenyans who were able to know his task and his responsibility. Part of that responsibility is to constitute the cabinet. So that at the end of the day, what we expect from him is to give us a cabinet that can be able to function, to give us a cabinet that can be able to reflect the face of Kenya. Of course, putting in mind his political interests as well, because at the end of the day, the president achieves the presidency through a political process. But it is not, again, in our forte to dictate to the president who exactly must be in his cabinet. I think that is extending our wishes too high. At the end of the day, the president has that responsibility to be able to appoint his cabinet.
All right. And just a point of clarity. Well, the reason why I'm saying that majority of Kenyans feel that, some of the names that President actually, reappointed or rather presented forward for Parliament to approve to form part of the next cabinet secretaries, there is some genuine concerns from Kenyans. And if you were to talk about, let's say, for example, the cabinet secretary for Interior and National Coordination, Professor Kindiki, well, in as much as the ranking, the polls indicated that he was a top performer, but there is some Kenyans genuine who feels that with all the police brutalities that happened under his watch, they felt that maybe he's not the wise choice. And that's why I referred and I said majority of Kenyans felt that some names in this sixth list of former CSs maybe did not augur well with them. So that was my point of clarity. And fair enough on that one. There is still another name that is missing. And of course, I want your opinion on this. This is Miano. He was proposed for the position of Attorney General. And of course, today in the list, her name was missing. So probably, what do you think of this?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with your sentiment about Professor Kindiki and some Kenyans expressing what you've just been able to express. But some Kenyans does not amount to majority of Kenyans, because diction is very, very important. And when you say majority, it looks like it is actually quantitative, that you've been able to actually have a real survey. And also on the same breath, whereas we must respect the opinion of every Kenyan, we must also be able to respect institutions, because the Cabinet Secretary for Interior is a policy maker. Now, when we talk about the person in charge of the police, it's an independent arm. It's under the Inspector General of Police. And that's why you're able to see most of the briefs today are by the Inspector General. And in all fairness, we were able to see the Inspector General resign from that office and see someone else take up. So I do not really think that you can be able to lump and apportion every blame of everything to the CS specifically, in as much as I agree that the buck must stop with him. Because when there is a problem at Kenyatta University, you do not necessarily have to blame the Minister of Education, because the Kenyatta University has a running system. But be that as it may, Honorable Rebecca Miano, I was also concerned that I was not able to see her name on the list, and I don't know why. I don't know whether it will be presented at another time with the second batch, and I do not want to speculate, because we are also sometimes very speculative, and we also extend our powers too highly, because I wouldn't want to say I would know why that was able to happen. I think it is in the same breath of just having more consultations. In my view, it was quite a good thing that we're able to have that office being given to, would be having the first woman attorney general, and would be able to see and gauge how she is able to perform, not because she's a woman, but because I think she's qualified for the job. She's a seasoned lawyer. She's been able to work in the corporate sector, in the legal fraternity. She has quite some experience. I would want to see how that is able to pan out. But again, without being very speculative, I think we'll be able to leave it at the presidency, so that we don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know if the name will be presented after further consultation. We don't know, maybe she would be taken back to ministry and someone else given the Attorney General's job. But I think it's the reserve of the president. And it being the reserve of the president, we must learn also as Kenyans to let the president do his job, and not always to want to read too much and also direct what the president should be able to do. Because at the end of the day, he's the one who has the job, and he must be allowed to do it.
All right. Fair enough. Now that President has, of course, presented the nominees for this cabinet secretary's position, now the job and, of course, the real task is at the hands of now the National Assembly. And, of course, today there were a bit of, some sort of introduction. And, of course, members from the opposition said that this will not be business as usual. And, of course, now with these 11 names and, of course, the 11 nominees already in Parliament. So do you think probably this time round we'll see proper vetting in terms of accountability, merit, credential, so that the same reason that why we are having this process today will not repeat itself again probably in the future?
In all fairness, what I expect and what I hope for is that we actually have a very proper vetting process, so that for once Kenyans can be able to see that people have been judged for what they can actually do, people have been given jobs for what they are qualified to do, and not for any other reason. That is what I hope for as a Kenyan and as an ordinary citizen outside here. That is what I hope and pray for. But what I saw today in Parliament does not necessarily point to that fact, because I was able to see ODM legislators more keen about their list than being keen about the vetting process. It simply, for me, painted a picture as though the ODM legislators are keen on knowing who is on their list before they know whether they should approve this one. And that moves us away from qualification. That moves us away from who actually qualifies for the job. It moves us away from what the leadership dictates that Kenyans have been speaking about and just espousing. So, for me, it's my hope. I really hope and pray that they are able to judge every person and give dockets to people who can qualify to do them, so that we don't have professionals again saying we cannot be able to listen to this person because we do not believe he has the capacity. Let us ensure the Parliament has that core responsibility. And I think, if anything, they should have learned their lessons from the last demonstrations that we had, and we even had Kenyans storm the Parliament. That should be testament enough for them to do the right thing. And that is what I hope for as a Kenyan. But the direction the debate took today, with the legislators from opposition more keen about what list has Raila presented and why is it not here, and why should it not come here quickly, and we need it within the next few days. To me, it pointed to a kind of blackmail, like we want to know what is in it for us before we know what we do with the approvals. Although that is my imagination, I might be wrong, but that is what I was able to read through what the legislators from the opposition side were actually championing for.
And you've actually raised a very important question, be it may as it may be, hypothetically speaking, let's say now this list that you talk about now, the opposition, should it see the light of the day? We have the same problem that we are talking about reuse and recycle. And of course, this is just similar, the similar thing that many of Gen Zs who are out there protesting against, some of the areas that they would want to be improved as far as the governance and, of course, the leadership of this country is concerned. So, in a scenario whereby leaders who are supposed to actually, vet for this and make sure that Kenyans get proper cabinet secretaries that will hold these key dockets in the institution of our country. And of course, if the same leaders are scrambling for this position, then where does it leave us as a country? And the gains that we are trying to, that the young people are trying to bring, this change, do you think probably this will just be a tall order at the end of the day?
In my view, the Gen Z uprising was a very good and timely uprising, and it raised very legitimate concerns. But it failed to then morph into what can be able to actually instill a significant change. Because for me, we lost it when we started saying that we are leaderless and rudderless. Because that left the president with no option, because the president opened doors and said we can be able to have a conversation, we can be able to discuss the way forward. But when we insisted on being leaderless and being faceless, there was no option. So, and as usual, political people in the political space had to take up and be able to take credit, because as it stands now, fortunately or unfortunately, the face of the Gen Z is Honorable Raila Odinga. Honorable Raila Odinga is the one on the table on behalf of the Gen Zs, and you cannot be able to blame him for that. You cannot be able to blame the president for that, because the president kept calling that why can't we be able to have a conversation? And that was the time when we were supposed to come out and, as young people say, these are the people who can represent our interests, because the president has to talk to somebody. You cannot be in the war, in the battlefield forever. You must be able to know what time to retreat, surrender, and have a conversation. I think, in my view, the uprising and the revolution that is being led by the Gen Zs failed to observe all the 48 laws of power, where one of them says that you must know when to stop and engage. Because we lost our opportunity to stop and engage, and that's why at the end of the day, everything that has been fought for by the Gen Zs is now being classified by the political class, and now they are the ones who will be able to take into fruition the future, the forward thinking of the country. And you cannot blame them for that. They are not at fault. The president is not at fault. It is because we kept an agenda that, in my view, was not very necessary in insisting that we cannot be led by anybody. We do not have anyone. We do not, because at the end of the day, the president has a country to run. The president has a mandate from the Kenyans. The president must be able to. The president accepted and said, "I agree to withdraw the finance bill. I have been able to withdraw to dissolve the cabinet. Can we be able to have a conversation?" That was the time, as young people would have sat on the table and said, "We need half of this cabinet. And half of this cabinet with our people, we want to be able to put out interviews out there so that the best people can be able to take the jobs." That is how we would have been able to negotiate. But you cannot be able to push things to a certain level, but still you do not want to engage. At the end of the day, we started moving in circular motion as though we are in a roundabout. So we would be, when you are in a roundabout and moving up and down, you will definitely be very busy. You will spend a lot of fuel, but you'll be going nowhere.
All right. Well, because we're running out of time, I want to thank you so much, Advice Mundalo, for making time. That is communication and leadership consultant. Asante sana for making time.